You will get to a point where when you're putting your plank down, the plank naturally wants to go right across your gap. So you can see how that is completely departing from the plank below and then coming into contact with the plank above. I've got the hull upside down, but my terminology is right, so I know it looked wrong. So for me, that's fine. And in the instructions, you'll see they also talk about that being, just what's going to happen due to the shape of this hull. So what I'm looking to do is not force the plank to go in that direction that it doesn't want, because you'll see it's starting to force it to flip out. So we're just going to let it lie across the way it wants to. Now some people will argue, and I wouldn't disagree with them particularly, that you should try and plank the first layer like you would the second layer. But for me, as long as your planks are all tight and you've got no big gaps and everything is laying nicely, the actual arrangement, the pattern of where the planks are, doesn't matter. And so to save time, I will always just chuck the planks in and fill the gaps with wood as far as possible. And as long as everything's tightly buttered together, you're not going to have lots of filling to do, and your sanding process will be fairly quick as well. And then you can concentrate on doing a really nice job of the second planking that will or may be seen. Right, so I've just marked out where I'm going to be gluing, and now I'm going to mark out where the plank comes into contact with this plank above. And it's a little bit difficult to see, but get an idea of where the plank is ending, which is there. And so we need to take an amount off. Like so. Now I don't want to cut my plank too short, so I'm actually going to cut it off a bit longer than it needs. We can always trim it after it's glued, and we can now trim off a small amount just to show you. And then we can test fit that. So put the plank back against the other plank, because this one is been cut in half, just because I find it easier to work on shaping on just one side. And now we can pop that in, butt it up against this plank, and just see what we need to do. Well, actually that's not bad. So that's going to sit fine like that. So this piece is ready to be glued in. Now there's a bit of a bend there. This is quite straight, so I'm actually going to go and steam this in the kettle. So there we go. I've just put a bit of shape in by holding it over the steam of the kettle. If you want to understand how that works, I explain it fully in the Sherborne build, so go and have a look at the planking stages of the Sherborne build. Okay, that's given me a bit less resistance now. I just want to make sure this is happy and it doesn't need any Yeah, I think it's actually just overlapping a little bit. So I'm just going to tidy that edge up. I'm using 220 grit in the main for the sanding jobs. And this isn't about tidiness, this is about tight fit. I want no gaps, or as few gaps as possible, so that I'm not having to waste time filling. We should be able to get the wood to do all the work. There we go. That goes in quite nicely. Just have a look. Yeah, that's laying flat. I'm finding that the planks on the other side can get in the way. So what I'm doing, once I know they're dry, is I'm just trimming them down a little bit. And this problem's about to go away because when we're done, we're just gap filling in the middle. Right. There we go, we're ready now, so we can put our glue down. So we'll start at this end here. Put plenty in because we want it to hold well. Then we're on this bulkhead here, and then okay, I'm just going to take the glue about that far along. Okay, so that's our glue on, we're ready to go. So load my first nail in. Place our plank nice and tight in its edge. Hold it up, pushing it up against that plank. Pushing that up there against the plank. Put the nail back in. It is the one drawback with nailers. You can get magnetic ones. I've never tried one. There we go. First nail in. Now I'm going to drive a nail in that back end there. There we go. And the rest of the job should be fairly simple. And this is all we're doing. We're just getting the wood in as nice and tight as we can, so that all we've got to do is some sanding to shape the hull. Okay, so I'm just going to hold that in place. I'm going to put a nail right in on the end there. And then I'm going to put another one. And you could also clamp this end if you wanted. And don't worry if it looks a bit messy now. You'd be amazed how tidy it gets once you start sanding. So there we go. Okay, so that looks okay. So we're now gap filling this next, and continuing from this straighter line, moving up will be the easiest thing to do. So I think we'll probably do that. Now, another thing I should say is, if it's easier, don't necessarily cut your plank in half and always use this. this particular bulkhead in the middle. You can cut your plank there and run it across, and then run a smaller one if that feels like that's going to be better for the shaping process. So this is where my last plank's going to go in, because when you lay the plank against it, it's going over the plank above very quickly. So that's naturally where that plank should be, whereas here I can cover a lot of space, and I should continue to follow this planking line now, so it should become easier. And we've got, what, 3 planks is it that we've got to put in? Let's just check that. 1, 2, 3. And the 4th one will be about 4 millimeters. So moving up from this straightest edge makes most sense. The planks are largely going to follow this line now all the way up, and we'll have this as our designated difficult one to fill, which won't be that difficult. And you can see on this side we're now equal again. You can see on this side it's exactly the same. So we're going to follow this line all the way up, and that'll be another three and a bit planks. So I'm going to crack on. I'll come back to you when we're filling the last hole and doing some of the stealers and droppers. So don't worry about the direction these planks are landing, as long as we're covering this, because we're just creating a base for everything else. None of what you can see so far will actually ever be seen. So you can draw on it and so on, don't worry about it. I've just marked out where my bulkheads are for future reference. So once you've got this shape and things are starting to come to a point, what you need to be doing is just marking out, drop your plank so there's a bit of a gap between the plank you're going to butt against, and so you can see where the gap ends. You can mark out where the gap ends, then push your plank up against the plank you're planking against, and mark where the 2 planks merge and this one wants to overlap, and that then becomes the line that you want to cut. When you've cut that line, you'll have something that looks like that should fit nice and tightly into that gap, like so. And if you want to put a little twist in the steam at this point here, just to help it keep some shape and not want to be fighting against the nails, particularly here, then do so. What I like to do is just make a mark, and that gives me a rough indicator of where the glue stops on this plank. So I know that I want glue on this side up to that mark, and that saves me any additional cleanup from guesstimating when I actually put this in. So this is all ready to go now. I'm going to put a little twist in there. It's probably not needed, but it won't harm to do it, and it takes a bit of the springiness out. So when you put that nail in there, you've not got the wood pushing against the nail wanting to ease it out, and you make sure it lies nice and flat. Now don't worry if you do what I've just done and manage to break your plank. It happens. I've estimated there's around about 4 additional planks in your bundle. Some of that you might use in filling some of your gaps, but I'm hoping that we'll largely use our growing pile of offcuts for all of that. So you do have plenty of spare if you do have a little disaster like that. So a little tip for you now. I've got a end of a plank that's not behaving. I can't sit that down. there isn't, it's just short of being able to nail it in. So I've got no way of holding that in place with a nail. So little tip how we deal with that. We're just going to lay a plank over the top of it, and I'm going to put a nail in below, and then a nail in above, and that's just going to hold that in place while that dries. Now we should be able to remove that before the glue totally sets, so if there's any glue that's oozed out that might be bonding this on, it's not a worry, and we're going to be sanding it anyway. So that's how I tackle little edges that want to stick out, because you can see here potentially we'll have that problem again here because we've got no bulkhead behind it. So I mean, I am 3 planks away from finishing this gap now, and every time we put a plank down there's likely to be a little corner sticking up. So there you go, that's how I deal with that. But here it behaved nicely, so we'll be able to sand that into shape, no issues. Right, I've been on holiday for a week, so I can't really remember what the last thing I said was about this. So I may edit this out, you might never see this, we'll see. Well, what we're basically trying to do is get all the rough unevenness of the first planking process down to a point where it's relatively smooth, so we can then do some final sanding. So I'm using some fairly coarse tools. I think I've probably already mentioned the tools. I have noticed that I've got a nail embedded in there, so I need to get that out. So best way of doing that is with a number 11 blade, and rather than using the point, which risks it snapping, we're going to use the heel of the blade there and just get underneath that enough so that we can grab it. There we go. Now in theory you can sand over these and take the head off, and it'll be fine, but I prefer to remove them no matter what. God, this one is dug in like a tick. But with a bit of perseverance I've been able to nudge that out, and there we go, we can just lift that out. So so here you can see we've got fairly lumpy, we're just taking that down so that it's all sort of blended in, and that's all we're doing at this first stage, just blending stuff in, getting the basic shape where it should be. When we've finished, there should be no part of this that's not been sanded. You should be able to run your hand over it and it feel smoothish, even though what we're doing is quite coarse work. But what you don't want to be able to feel is individual planks, ideally. One of the benefits of working with these really coarse tools, other than it takes down material very quickly, is you get a lot less fine dust in the air. So I'm going to put my mask on now, because obviously wood dust is carcinogenic. So I'm going to carry on and just get this into a basic shape, and then I'll come back to you.
So we also want to square this off. We want to make sure that this is all level with the kit parts. So I'm just going along here, taking the wood strips, the full strake down flush with the false keel here. Once we can see we're starting to eat into the centerpiece of wood there, I can take that down to something a little bit less coarse. And then at one end we have quite a sharp edge, and on the other end we have a slightly rounded edge, and we need to make sure that we get that correct. So here we have a slightly rounded edge, so I'm just going to round that off and follow the template like so. Okay, so that's the coarse work done, and you can see it still looks fairly rough, doesn't it? But it's largely in the shape we want and ready to go. Now if you've got any gaps at this stage, you could do some large gap filling at this stage. And so here you can see what looks like a gap. It's actually filled with glue, but I do have a gap here, so I'm going to show you how to fill that if you want to. Now you don't need to be honest. The planking, when we finish sanding it and then come to lay the planking, the second planking over the top, it won't be an issue. But all this sawdust that we've got we can use, so let me show you what we're going to do with that. So what we're going to do is we're going to scoop up some of these sanding dust that we've captured through the process of sanding this, and I'm just adding it onto some small amount of wood glue here. Now wood glue usually shrinks in it as it dries, but what happens when you add some of your sanding dust to it, your sawdust, you thicken that up and it reduces the, well, it doesn't reduce the amount of shrinkage, but because you've got particles of wood dust in there, what happens is it appears to shrink less because you've bulked it up. So we make a little paste with our sawdust and our glue, and you've got a filler. There we go. I'm just going to put a little bit more in. So the wood fibres are mixing with the wood glue, and you can see I've now got something that's quite practical as a filler. So where was that gap? There we go. So we can now push that into place, and you can see it behaves just like a filler, just like a putty. You push the wood in, it's mixed with the glue, it's going to bond, and ultimately it's going to be sandable as well. So there we go, put that in. So I'll leave that to dry, and then when that's dried we can sand over it, and I can probably put where the glue has shrunk here, and it grabs really well. So it's a great way of making a quick, cheap filler, not have to use your expensive stuff, and it's especially good with bigger gaps because the fibres help you fill those gaps really quickly. I've never tried it with CA, I've got to be honest. I know someone's bound to ask me that question. I've never tried it with CA, but the wood glue solution works well. So there you go, and you can make up small quantities as and when you like. So there you go. So that's another little tip that we didn't share on the Sherborne build, so we're learning all the time. Now, while that's drying on that side, what I can do on this side is start getting this a bit smoother. So I'm using 180 grit here. And you can see that's already making that a lot smoother. There is nothing like the feel with your hand of the shape to get it correct. Now, this will take a little bit of time, but it's worth getting it right. So we want a nice, smooth, gradual going into here. We need to thin this big thick edge down so that it's going into that there, so it's nicely migrated in. Don't worry about the ends. We need to get the posts out and have a look at what we need to do with those first, but right now what we're going to do is just smarten up what we've done, and when we've done that we'll have a much better view once it's a bit smoother of what work we need to do to get this looking perfect, ready for the second planking. So I'm just going to go over all of this, and then if there's anything particular to talk about I'll take you through it. But yeah, let's get this nice and smooth, shall we? So I've started test fitting with this part here, which is the piece that goes in at the bow, piece 26, and there's a little slot there, and that should fit into that, and then you should find that that fits around there. So this is just the test fitting stage. I've managed to break mine, so let me just take this out. My part was leaning over a little bit, and I thought I could just flex it out a little bit because it was only a tiny fraction, and it split the part at the deck level. So I mean, it's not an issue, I can glue that back in, but I now need to take that back in line with that. So you need to have a gap. You need to have this part taken back so that you've got full access to that gap. So that's your primary thing, that you get this part to fit. And then when you've done that, you can have a look at what this looks like. And what we don't want is for this to be all flat. There, we need to sand that in so that it comes in a nice gradual curve into this, so that the second planking goes over it. You don't want to step there, you want that nice and smooth. So we need to take this down, this edge down, so that it is sanded to a point here, and that includes this bit here. So I'm going to repair this, but I'm going to take this bit down first. So what we're going to do, I always like to show things like repairs because it gives people ideas if they have a problem, how to resolve it. So we need to take it down there, and then we can glue that back into place, possibly after we've fitted this, and then we can do any further corrections after that. So I can simply take this back now. If I get my Coarse file, and then my less coarse one. There you go, you can see we've taken that back But you can see what the problem was. You see how that's bending inwards. Probably that came out of me clamping it in some way. So I need to now test fit, and you can see that won't fit in. So I have to open that edge up from the inside so that I can fit this. There we go. So with that held in place, that is now fitting okay. Now when you look at the instructions, you can see they've got a curve in. We want to get that as smooth as possible. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to just take that step, this hard edge here where we flattened it. So we've done it that way first, which has squared it off. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that back by putting a shape in it. So that when it comes down to this point, it's at a point rather than a step, and then we feather that back into it if we need to. There we go. And so that we don't have an acute angle, we'll then take that back a little bit. And then just feather it in so it's a nice gradual curve in. We don't want any planks with a sharp curve. Yeah, you can see, done that side now, and that looks a lot better. So we'll do the same on this side, and then when we put this on, I just plop that into place. Right, so you can see how with that in the centre, that is now coming straight into there. We've not got any step like we have on this side. So you can see the difference. There's a step there, and that gradually goes into there. So a little bit more work just on this point here, where you can feel it coming in, and we just want to make that a bit more gradual, feather it in a little bit more, but you get the idea. We want a nice gradual curving to this. So I'll do the same on this side, and then I also wanted to show you, there you go, that's our filler sanded in, and you can see that's completely filled that now, no gap at all. Obviously the next thing we need to do is just test fit that we have fully fitting parts that plop into place okay. So if they don't, open up these tabs a little bit. You can do that by gently sanding or just trimming back with your knife. So I can see I've got a bit of an overhang here, so I'm just going to trim that back with a knife. So just where this slot is, just squaring it up like so. Just taking it back very, very carefully. You can see I'm just gently doing that until this part slots into place like it does. There we go. And then we have another part that we can test fit at the back here. And what we're looking for once we've got these pieces into place is what we're looking for is that we've not got any steps, just as we had at the front, and make sure that this is sort of merged nicely into here. And we want to do that before we glue these into place so that this is nice and square. So it's put it on, have a look, have I got a step, do I need to thin it down? Yes I do. Do some sanding, put it back on, what's it look like now? So here I've got a bit of a step. I can actually see that the wood is quite wide this point here, so if I thin that down, that should solve that problem. And then again, we just feather it into the whole hole. So if you remember on the Sherborne, we thinned this area down, and we deliberately didn't do that. And actually it doesn't need to be done. You just need to get the first planking right before you do the second planking. There we go. So we're almost taking it down to 0. So you could, in theory, take this down a little bit, but it doesn't need it. There we go. So when we come to put a plank above that, it should go into the little rabbit line and what have you. So there is a rear post as well, so we need to get that out. I think that's part 29, is it? Let me see. That's 27. That's 28. So yeah, it'll be part 29. So let's find that. That's this part here. So the part 29, the stern post, fits slightly differently. This little bit that has the number on is actually fitting underneath this deck. So it should slot in, go underneath the deck, like so, and then be straight against that. And then we're going to do exactly the same again. We're going to check if, when this is on straight, which is not quite, it is now, how wide we are and how much work we need to do. And quite a bit is the answer. So quite a bit just to shape this, mainly at this top end here. It's not so bad where we've done the sanding at the bottom, although it does need a little bit of work. So again, keep taking it off, keep test fitting it until you're happy that this slopes down into it quite nicely. So I'm going to do that off camera and show you what that looks like, but you get the idea. I've shown you now. We sand away the edge and then we feather it back in so you've got a nice smooth gentle shape, and we've got no steps or sharp dips in the woodwork. Right, so I'll get on with that and then I'll come back to you. So when you are done, you should have something that looks like this. So we've got a finished hull. In my case, not really any gaps. It's all good. Nice and smooth, and we're happy that there's no lumps or bumps or misshapes or anything like that. So happy to proceed. So we're ready for the second planking. But we've got a few things to do before that. We're effectively at step 49 in the instructions, page 17 of the build manual. And just once again, test fit everything so you're happy, you understand where everything goes. What we're going to do now is we're going to put these parts on that we were using for test fitting when we were sanding. Now the instructions don't really tell you to do this, but there is laser scorch on these that in some areas needs to be removed. So if we look at this part, for example, this stern post, and insert that in situ like so, we don't need to worry about this bit here because we're going to be putting glue on it, but all the rest of it is going to be visible or partly visible after the build. And regardless of whether you are leaving the parts as natural wood or whether you're staining them or whether you're painting them, not removing the laser burn is going to give you a different effect. So if you've decided that you're painting the inside white, this is going to be a lot darker and need a lot more coats of paint than the pear would on the inside. So you know, you need to think about that. You also need to be making your decision now on whether you're painting it, whether you're varnishing it, or whether you're doing a combination, because they're going to start making that decision is going to start making other decisions as you go through the build. So we need to remove the laser scorch. We can simply do that with an abrasive stick. We also need to get rid of the little nubs there where we have detached this from the carrier sheet. So we've done this before with the Sherborne, you've seen this before. We just sand this down, get it nice and smooth, get the nubs off. You've got to remember in the instruction manual, what they're doing is they are showing you the build of the prototype, so they may cut corners and we don't want to. So here we've got a little bit of an angle that is not 90 degrees, so I can't get in with that easily without potentially deforming the part. So I'm going to use a sanding stick which is a little bit springy and I can push into the edges. Now we will have a rudder coming out of here, but there will be a gap and it will be visible. So there we go, that's already looking a lot better. Right, now then, also we've got some laser burn on the outside surface. So I've got a 400 grit here, you could use a 600. I'm just going to take that off as well for exactly the same reason. If you're painting it, it will cover up obviously, but get the worst of it off. If you're wanting to varnish it, you need to take that right back. So I'm going to do that on all of these parts and then I will come back to you. Okay, got my parts cleaned up. We don't need to worry about this because obviously we've got parts going on top of these, it gets sandwiched in. So as long as any exposed surfaces are cleaned up, we're all good. So it suggests in step 50 and 51 that we start with the prow piece. So we're just going to test fit that. And I've got a repair to do at the same time. So we're just going to put that in the slot. That fits nicely, so we know that's going to go in okay. So as per the picture on the instructions, we can put a little bit of glue down. Make sure you go all the way around. There we go. Then we slot that in like so and push that into place. You've got a couple of minutes to just go around and make sure it's nice and square, it's straight and it's as it should be. And then I'm just running my finger down where that bead of glue is that's coming out. There we go. Excellent. So I can make my repair now. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just make my repair. So thought you might be interested to see how we get on with that. So we can't glue against that, so we can only glue the broken section. and it's going in that way. Make sure I'm putting the glue on the right bit. There we go. So I'm just gently pushing that into place. I might have to do a little bit of sanding cleanup with that, but that's effectively in. So I'm just going to hold that into place while the glue grabs, so don't need to worry too much because I can sand this down ahead of the second planking. There we go. Now give it a moment and then I can get in with a knife and clear away the glue on the inside of the joint there. You'd never know we'd done a repair. Making sure I get all the glue out on that little hub right there, because we'll be cutting those off. There. Happy with that. Okay, so now we can turn this upside down. Now at this stage, if you've not already done so, remove your keel alignment clamps. These are parts 25. You've got a good number of them. I've taken them all out, although it only shows 3 being used in the instructions. But I've got them all there just in case. Now we're going to put the stern post in. So it's the same process. We've already test fitted it, so we know everything is okay from the point of view of that. Now because this bit goes inside, I'm putting a bit of glue on here, just on the outside edges of this little section that goes under the deck there, and then under there and along the full length of that. And I'm not skimping. I don't mind the glue oozing out a little bit because I can use that almost like a sealer, if you like. So I can now carefully plop that into place like so, and just check that's nice and square, which it is. Get rid of any excess glue with my finger. Okay. And then if needs be, if you've been a bit messy like I just was, just clean your parts up, get rid of any glue. There we go. So that's my stern post in okay. So now we do these pieces. I think it's easier to get them aligned. So front at the front, like so. They'll only fit one way. You'll notice that one tab is smaller than the other. So although you can actually get it to fit in the other one incorrectly if you want, but it won't fit. So if you're not sure, just test fit. There we go. And what I'm doing now is I'm just test fitting the alignment. Alright, okay, they're going to work okay. Brilliant. What a good idea they are. So now this time we can put glue in the location holes. and we can put glue on this end here, and then on here. It's easier to do it on the part because that gives you the correct length of glue. Make sure you've got the glue right to the end. And then that can slot into place. Now, as always, you've got a moment so you can just check it's in, push tightly up into place. Yeah. And I'm just going to get rid of any excess glue. Because we don't want anything gluing those clamps into place. So there you go, that just helps keep that square. What a good idea that is. Okay, and then we do exactly the same on this back piece here. So I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the stern post that's overhanging the false keel, a little bit in our location holes, and then on the part. Slot that into place. There you go. Now with me, I've got a tiny gap between these two parts here. 1/4 mil, maybe, something like that. There we go. I don't see that they've necessarily got that on the instructions, but there is a clamp covering it, so hard to tell. But we can deal with that after. Okay. So I'm going to put a clamp on the back here, just double checking I've got no glue. What I'm going to do is I'm going to push this in from the side, which will align those two parts, which is what I need, and then it's not touching the glue and it's aligned there. So I don't know if we use these alignment clamps again later on, so put them to one side, don't get rid of them.